Matt Vogel is a principal Muppet performer who took over the roles of Sesame Street's Big Bird and the Count, as well as the most recognizable puppet in the world, Kermit the Frog. He also performed the villainous Constantine in the 2014 film Muppets Most Wanted, and has made the Muppets' Uncle Deadly the breakout fan favorite he is today. I sit down with Matt Vogel to talk about his work with these characters, the new Muppet series Muppets Now on Disney+, his own projects, and much more on this episode of Under the Puppet. You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that talks to puppeteers about the art and business of puppetry. My name is Grandpa Choco, and this is Under the Puppet. Well, Matt Vogel, welcome to Under the Puppet. It's an absolute honor having you on the show.
Grant, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to start by, on Twitter, you posted some really great pictures of you and your brother when you were kids with Sesame Street puppets.
Yes.
Was Sesame Street your first exposure to puppetry?
Sesame Street would have been my first exposure to puppetry, yes. I was fascinated with the Muppet characters as a kid, and I'm a first-generation Sesame Street watcher. The show came out in 1969. I was born in 1970. And I loved Sesame Street as a kid. And then, the Muppet Show came along, and that was it. I was in.
Yeah. And you started building puppets at a young age, right?
I did. The puppets that I had just weren't doing it for me. I was interested, in watching the Muppet Show. Something that really fascinated me was when you would see like the puppeteer's head, or you would see the arm sleeve, the sub sleeve on Rolf or something, or not on Rolf, but on Link Hogthrob or something like that. You'd see the sub sleeve, and I was always curious about what was happening down there. And then I, was curious about, well, maybe I could make my own puppet. And so I got some T-shirts of my dad's. And I had no idea what I was doing. I think I was in third grade. I took masking tape and some markers, and I just started and cardboard, and I just tried to do what I could. I tried to replicate what I was seeing. And I think that first puppet that I made, the shape of it anyway, kind of had an Ernie-shaped head, kind of a football-shaped head. And I think that's what I was trying to replicate. And I shoved cotton in it and to try to, fill out the head. But I had no idea what I was doing. And I used those puppets to entertain the kids in my neighborhood, and then, PTA meetings and churches and, all kinds of things.
And there was no, it was just you figuring it out on your own? No books from the library or anything like that?
Nothing. Yeah. I didn't know what I was doing. I think
I had
a cousin. I do have those puppets. They're in terrible shape. But my cousin Kelly, she helped me. I just remembered this just now. She helped me make the feet on one of them, on the second version, the Mach 2 version of the first puppet that I made. And we paper maché'd the feet. So there were these big blocky feet, and they were, but I remember her helping me. That was the only assistance I had from anyone in making these puppets.
Do you still build today?
No. I built in, and again, I didn't know what I was doing, but I did build a little bit in college and a little bit after college. When I went to college, I had the opportunity to do some summer job being a puppeteer with my college roommate, and we would travel around St. Louis, because I went to college in St. Louis. We would travel around that summer, and we did daycare centers. And then when I graduated from college, I built upon that group of puppets and moved home to Kansas City for a year, which is where I'm from. And I did a touring puppet show around daycares in Kansas City, but I had to kind of build puppets. But I still didn't have really any idea what I was doing. I think I did have a puppet book about how to make foam puppets. And I did have that. I can't remember who made that book, but that's kind of how I learned how to do sort of making puppets. But I'm certainly not a builder, and I'm in awe of anybody that can build a beautiful puppet.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Growing up, were your parents creative?
My parents were, my mom, I remember my mom would do little doodles. She would draw little doodles and things like that. And my dad he was talented and creative. He built machines. He built machines that would like package bottling machines. He would build bottling machines that would help to fill chemical into a bottle, and then a capper machine. And he would do that kind of thing. So he was very into that, and that was his job. But not creative like in the theater or in puppetry or in acting or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, when you were a kid, you got into acting, and you even took classes at the Theater for Young America, right?
That's right. There was this great theater in Kansas City. It's still there, and it's run by Gene and Cheryl Mackey and their daughter Valerie. And when I started taking acting classes there, the reason I started taking acting classes there was because I had done a talent show in ninth grade, and in doing that talent show, I won. But I remember hearing somebody booing. I remember hearing boos in the audience, and that really it hit me deep, and I put those puppets away. And my mom knew that I was creative and wanted to try to find an outlet for me, so she sent me to the Theater for Young America, and I took acting classes there, and then I did summer theater there, and that's kind of where I met a lot of really creative people, my people, the people that I was close with when I was growing up in those years. And it's thanks to the Theater for Young America.
Yeah. Did you kind of, when you started going there, get this sort of the acting bug, like you wanted to be an actor? That's what your goal was?
Yeah. So I went there as an actor, and then I met somebody there who was one of the actors there who had grown up there just like I was growing up there, but he was a little older than me. And his name was Sean McCall. And he said at one point, you ought to look into, if you're wanting to do this, you ought to look into going to Webster University, which is a conservatory of theater arts in St. Louis. And there's an audition process, and you get in, and then, you either let you in or they don't let you in. And so that's what I decided I was going to do. And I that's the one college that I applied to, and I got in.
Do you feel that studying acting and taking acting classes has helped your puppetry?
I think it's essential for me. I think, and we talk about this a lot with it, that there are all of these buckets that you have to fill when you're a puppeteer. And you have the two main buckets are, you have your technical bucket, and then you have your acting bucket, your character bucket. And the hope is that you can kind of fill those buckets up so that they are filled equally, and you are just as good an actor as you are a manipulator. And a lot of times what happens is, especially when you're starting out as a puppeteer, is one is really like maybe you're a really strong manipulator, and you're just really great at lip sync and choreography, but your characters are flat and weak. Or it's the other way. You're just a super amazing actor, but you can't, your lip sync is just not up to par. And it's a constant struggle or constant work to try to even out those buckets so that you're carrying equal weight on both sides.
Right. Are you still pursuing acting now, or is it all puppetry?
Well, Grant, I feel that what I am doing is acting.
Well, of course, yes.
It is acting, but I get to be a frog or a giant bird or a vampire who's obsessed with numbers.
Right.
And so I do see it as this is an acting job. It's just a little different than what I had thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I'm not insulting puppetry, please. I should have said puppet less acting. Anyway,
right.
We got it. You've also on Sesame Street and the Muppets and you have your own band, the Mighty Weaklings. You do a lot of singing. Did you take singing lessons, or have you taken singing lessons?
I took singing lessons in college, but it wasn't my major wasn't musical theater. My major was just, they called it regional acting or regional theater. It was just an acting major, but I did end up doing a couple of musicals while I was in school. And I did take some singing lessons, but I'm not a trained singer for sure.
Just naturally can pick up the notes and stuff and singing character and all that kind of stuff.
I think, and some of that has to do with I was in band when I was growing up. Music was part of my life growing up. I was in the band. I played trumpet in the band. I was in chorus. So I had that. I took piano lessons from my aunt for a very short time. And so I have like little bits of information here and there. But I wouldn't consider myself a trained musician.
Well, I wanted to talk about, you mentioned these sort of traveling puppet shows you did after college. And I wanted to talk to you about them because I think it's a great way for puppeteers to learn their craft and go out and do things and create. I'm always for creating your own stuff.
Absolutely.
That's 100% my thing.
Yeah.
What kind of shows were you doing? Were they like nursery rhymes or your own shows or what?
They were my own shows that I had written. It was called The Amazing Traveling. No, wait, the Puppy J Traveling Show, or the Puppy Joe Traveling Show. That's what it was. Something like that. It was a dog, and all these characters. And I would write shows. They did have some sort of curricular, idea to them. But they were short shows that I had written, and then I had my friend Brian Stubler. He helped me out. He was a good friend growing up all throughout my childhood and all the way up into college, and he helped me do those shows, and it was a lot of fun. It was hard work because you gotta. When I was growing up, my dad had built a set for me that I could that he would put in the car, and we could travel around. And then for this show, I built a set and just tried to. I built it out of. It was actually out of stretched muslin canvas, painting canvas, and it was the biggest size that I could buy. It was like 4x4 pieces, and I put two of those together, and then I put a little hinge between them, and then I built a puppet stage, and I would travel that around. But it's the middle of summer, and packing all your stuff into a car and traveling, probably with no air conditioning in the car to the next location, and trying to hit all these preschools all over the metropolitan area in Kansas City, which it's not a huge city, but it's got to drive to get anywhere.
Yeah. What advice do you have for a puppeteer who's sort of following that path? They're creating these shows and they need to keep the attention of, these preschool students during a show. What advice do you have in creating a show that will keep their attention?
Oh, I've been out of it so long. I've been out of doing that kind of show for so long, but I always find that having dynamic, bold characters can keep the attention of a child. And the example is any character on Sesame Street. I mean, there are all these bold characters that are interesting to watch. And I think that if you're out there creating your own show and you're out there trying to connect with young kids to try to teach them something or entertain them or whatever you want to do, having bold characters will really help. It'll really help you, and it'll also make it a lot more enjoyable for you and for the kids.
Yeah. Well, after you were performing around Kansas City and stuff, you moved to New York. Was the goal to go into acting and
That's right. The goal was to go to New York to be an actor. And the weird thing is that on the way to New York, long story short, we got an apartment, but we couldn't move into it right away. So we decided we would go where my girlfriend, my now wife, we were going to go to her mom's house and stay there for the month until we could get into this apartment. And on the way there, my wife, my then girlfriend, Kelly, said she was looking through the Backstage newspaper, which is the actors' trade newspaper where you have all the auditions in it. And she saw an ad there, and it had Kermit the Frog, and it said, "Do you measure up to be a Muppet?" And, I had previously sent an audition tape to Jim Henson Company, Jim Henson Productions at the time. And I'd gotten a very nice rejection letter. And so, my goal was still to be an actor. I just kind of put it out there to see what would happen. So Kelly sees this ad in the newspaper that says, "Do you measure up to be a Muppet?" There's Kermit the Frog there. They're looking for somebody my height. They're looking for somebody left-handed, which I am left-handed, but I am a right-handed performer. So I called the number, and they said, "Okay, well, tell us when you get to New York." All right, that's fine. So a month later, I moved to New York and, called that number again, and they said, "Okay, great. Can you come in, a couple weeks here and audition for us?" And I said, sure, of course I can. Well, it turns out I was auditioning for John Henson, Jim's youngest son. And I was the last guy to audition that day, and it was this polar bear, a Coca-Cola polar bear. That's what it was. And it was this Coca-Cola polar bear that John Henson performed. He would go to, big Coca-Cola events, and he would show up there as the big Coca-Cola polar bear, a real version of the CG Coca-Cola polar bear commercial bear. And he was looking for somebody to kind of not take over, but to do it when he was unavailable, because he was very busy. And I was the last guy to go. And he said, after I went, he said, "You want to go to lunch?" And I was like, yes, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I want to go to lunch. So I'm sitting at lunch with John Henson, which is totally bizarre. I've just met him. And, I'm sure I told him some of the things that I've told you here today. And at the end of that lunch, he said, "Do you want to come up to my place for New Year's Eve?" I was like, yeah, I do want to come up to your place. Well, yeah, of course, sure. So, shortly after that, we did go up for New Year's Eve, and it was amazing. And shortly after that, I started doing this Coca-Cola polar bear when John was unavailable. And it was this full body thing with a camera in the nose that you could look at people. And it needed to be left-handed so that you could shake hands with people with your right hand. So I learned how to, puppeteer left-handed for that. And, being left-handed, it wasn't that difficult. I wasn't working to a monitor. I was really working to a camera that I was seeing where I was going. So it was a little bit different. And I wasn't completely monitor trained anyway, so it was all right.
I wanted to just ask really quickly about the left-handed thing, because I also know another puppeteer, Russ Walco out here, who is left-handed, but he puppeteers right. Is that just when you were learning, you just learned, you saw pictures and, they're doing it with their right hand, I'm going to do it with my right hand? Or was there any reason behind that?
I've always been a little bit ambidextrous, and I don't think there was any conscious decision, because growing up I was left-handed, and I can't really use left-handed scissors. I don't know why. I can't really use them. I have to use right-handed scissors. There are certain things that I just picked up the puppet, and for some reason it became the way that I did it. Marty Robinson's the same way. He's left-handed, but he is a right-handed puppeteer. Dave Goles is the same way. He's left-handed, but he's a right-handed puppeteer. And I don't know.
So it's a sign of genius, basically.
Not in my case, but
yeah. What was the path from Coca-Cola Bear to Sesame Street? How did that happen?
So if I recall, there were some workshops in there that I was invited to do. I did another puppet video, and this time they didn't say thanks, but no thanks. This time they said, "We'd like you to come to a workshop." And I remember being at a workshop with Kevin Clash and with Camille Benora. And I remember being at this workshop, and it was in a dance studio. I remember very little about things, Grant. I don't have a great memory, but I do remember being at this workshop. And shortly after that, I remember going to be at the Thanksgiving Day parade that year, being asked to do that. They needed some extra hands. It's usually not I take that back. Many of the main performers do perform on that float, but not everybody is available. Sometimes people want to spend Thanksgiving with their families. So I had the opportunity to do the parade, and I did. And I was Bert in the parade, and had a great time. It was amazing. It's amazing to do the Thanksgiving Day parade, because just this sea of people, seeing these people look at their childhood heroes on this float. It's amazing.
Do you do it every year because you live in the area?
I usually do it every year. Yeah, I think I've not done it maybe twice. And now I think I've gotten to the point where one year I will do Big Bird, and then the next year I'll do the Count. Just so it's a totally different experience doing Big Bird in the parade than it is doing the Count. For doing Big Bird in the parade, I can't see really anything. I can hear people, but I can't totally see. He's got a tie on, but it's it's harder to make a connection. And it's also, you're going for many, 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 many blocks down
right
to 34th Street from 79th. and it takes a while, and it's strenuous. And so I've started doing 1 year I'll do Big Bird, and the next year I'll do the Count, and that way I can kind of feel like I can also talk to my fellow puppeteers around me and have a good time and kind of communicate with them, and then also really make connections with the people out there on the parade route.
Yeah. When you first got to Sesame Street, what sort of jobs were you doing?
Well, when I first got to Sesame Street, you're doing right hands. That's really what you do when you arrive. And I actually kind of got to Sesame Street because of an audition with Carol Spinney. So I should probably back up and say that that's how I even got there in the first place. I had got a call from Renee Rochelle, who was at the time the talent coordinator for the Jim Henson Company, and she was the one who had sent me the rejection letter, and she was also the one who had sent me the, hey, come and do a workshop letter. And now she was calling me to say, can you do a Big Bird voice? And I said, yes, of course I can. And I couldn't. I had never thought about doing that before. And so I got a bunch of CDs and videotapes of Big Bird and watched them and tried to do what my version of Big Bird, and then went to this audition. And the idea was that, Carol Spinney was 65 years old at the time. And, I think he was probably thinking of maybe slowing down and this is back in 1996, 1997. And I'd never met him. And he was introduced to me, and this is the story that I always tell, is that when he was introduced to me, he had never met me, didn't know who I was, and Renee said, Carol, this is Matt Vogel, Carol Spinney, and Carol's eyes lit up, and he said, oh, Vogel, your name means bird. This might be the job for you, which is a very, very daunting thing to hear before you audition for the guy who plays Big Bird.
Right.
But Carol was sweet, and he, got into Big Bird, and he was just so great. I had another time with him. There was that audition, and then we had another time just working together, just the two of us. And he was a wonderful guy, and he really took. I was not intending to say this, but he really took me under his wing, and he really made sure that I was okay, and then I found myself on Sesame Street. But you don't just jump into Big Bird when you start on Sesame Street. You start where everybody else does, and that is doing right hand work. And it's very important. It's a very important job, because it's you're supporting that main performer, and you are trying to help the picture look good. You're trying to make it look right. And that's also just a great way to get hours and hours of time on camera without having to worry about generating a character and speaking lines and doing all the things that you do once you've been there for a while. So that's what I was doing. I was doing right hands.
Well, in your opinion, what makes a puppeteer a good assist, or an assist you would want to work with again?
A good right hand, there comes a point when, as the main performer, I can't know that you're there. I shouldn't know that you're there. And that's what I would tell people. That's my observations, is the main performer really shouldn't know that you're there unless they need you to know that they need something from you. But you need to be there for them, right by them, paying attention, but don't distract them from their job. There's a whole bunch of things that you have to do to be a good right hand. You just want to be seen when it's time to be seen. That's the main thing, I think, and be supportive of that person. Help enhance that performance.
And I know that you're a main performer and you perform a lot of, super important characters, but do you even today do some right-handing every now and then?
I do right-handing every now and again, yeah. We all jump in. Everybody on Sesame Street, or even with the Disney Muppets, we jump in and we will do right hand if called upon. Whether it's a right hand, whether it's a live hand, or whether it's rod hand work, we'll jump in and do all kinds of assisting when necessary. Sure.
I think that's important for puppeteers to hear, because I think sometimes newer puppeteers will think, well, when I get the big part, I don't have to right hand anymore. And it's like, no, everybody does.
Everybody kind of does. Yeah. I mean, it's essential, because we're all part of this team, all trying to get the same good result. And that might mean that we have to do some assisting right then, or drop a prop into frame, or do all those things that are fun to do. They're fun to do. That's why I think we all like to do them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit about your mentor and friend, Jerry Nelson. Do you remember the first time you met Jerry?
Gosh, you know what? I've been thinking a lot about Jerry lately, but I cannot remember the first time that I met him. I know I did a heck of a lot of right-handing for Jerry as the Count and as Harry and other characters that he would play along the way. I don't remember that, but I do remember this, Grant. There was one, I think I must have met him in 97 when I was new guy. And he said one year, this was around, I think it was around the year 2000. I'll have to check on that to make sure, but I think it was around 2000. He said to me, "Do you want to come up to the Cape?" He had this place in the Cape. He said, "I'm doing a show up there, and I think you and Kelly can come up here. And you guys want to come up here and stay with me, and we'll just put on this show. And you can bring some puppets, and I'm going to do some music, and we'll tell some stories, and we'll do this show." And Kelly and I jumped at the chance. We were like, "Absolutely, we'll come up and spend time with you on the Cape, Jerry." And so we did. And it was great. It was a great summer. It was a great time, just hanging with Jerry. It was just the three of us in his house, and it was a fun show that we wrote. I wrote it with Jerry, and it was so much fun. I do remember that. I remember hanging out with him, after hours, and having little sips of scotch, and just talking. And it was one night we were sitting there, after we had written and worked on the show that day, and he said to me, "Matt, Sesame Street is great, but you always have to have something that's your own, that you create." And I was like, "Okay, I will." And I've made it kind of that is, you kind of said this early on too, that always be creating something, always have that thing that's yours. And that's one of the things that I am grateful to have had the opportunity to be in the room with Jerry when he said that to me, And so I still do that to this day.
Working with Jerry so much, and as you mentioned, you were right-handing him on the Count and Harry and other projects as well. What advice did he give you, or what advice did you learn from watching him that you still use today, in addition to creating for yourself?
Right. I mean, that's the big one, really. And Jerry was a guy who did that. He played in bands and all over the place. He played a lot of music, and that was his thing. But just watching Jerry perform, and as he got older and he couldn't perform anymore, and I would puppeteer for him, I would be sitting on the floor with my arms up above my head, and I would be looking across at Jerry, who was sitting maybe 10 feet away from me. And he had his mic, and he was looking at a monitor, and he had his script. But he delivered the lines as the Count exactly as if he were underneath the puppet. There was no difference. There was no change in he wasn't kind of phoning it in. He wasn't half doing it. He was fully there, boldly bringing that character. And that's one thing I remember about him. He was just bold at bringing those characters, whatever, because he did hundreds of them. He did hundreds of one-time characters, and they are all interesting, and they are all fantastic. He had this amazing set of pipes, but he could have this amazing set of pipes, but if he wasn't this bold performer, it wouldn't have made a difference.
Right.
And so I think I carry that with me.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to. We talked a little bit about Big Bird, but how physically demanding is the Big Bird puppet?
Oh my gosh, he's physically demanding. He is a big bird. It's a lot of feathers. It's over 4,000 feathers. We're looking for ways to make him lighter, just to be able to, see if there's any way to lighten him up, and using materials that maybe they didn't have back then. But he is heavy. And actually, they've inside when Carol was in his 60s, they put a a helix inside the neck of Big Bird. So it's this helix that is made out of boning, and it was shoved into the neck to kind of give a little extra support. And because over time, whether it doesn't matter how old you are, if you're holding that puppet above your head, over your head, it starts to lower.
Yeah.
And we use that all the way up until just recently, and I've just recently started to take it out, to take out some of the weight in the bird and see how I could operate him without that. Without a little bit more weight. I mean, it's probably very minimal. It may be a pound or whatever it is, but every little ounce makes a difference on the weight of that bird. And I will tell you that I'm sure that when creating that bird, as when they create all of the puppets that they do at Jim Henson Company, they go for like trying to create something that is light and easily manipulatable. That's what they are trying to do.
Yeah.
But he's still heavy.
Right. Well, how do you take precautions to avoid injury when you're in Big Bird or just in puppetry in general? Do you have some sort of stretches and stuff that you do?
Nothing in particular that I do every time or do it on a regular basis, but I do try to stay limber. I do try to stretch out when I can. I am trying to stay in shape as I approach my 50th year this year. I'm trying to stay in shape. But I have injured myself mostly in the bird, and it has to do with a back issue, like upper back, lower back. You move wrong inside that bird, or you just twist a little bit too far one way, and that's it. And I remember one time I did injure myself, and we were shooting a little segment on Sesame Street a long time ago called Journey to Ernie. And it's this segment that I played Big Bird in because it was very physically demanding. So much so that one day I threw my back out, and I was out. I could not move. And Kevin Clash had to get inside Big Bird and try to puppeteer that thing. And I don't know if he'd ever gotten inside him before, but when he got out, he was like, oh man, I don't know. That's hard. Meanwhile, I'm like laying down on the floor. I'm just like lying right on the floor, flat. I can't move.
Not only are you a performer, but you're also the puppet captain on Sesame Street. Can you tell us a little bit about what that job is and what your responsibilities are?
So on Sesame Street, being the puppet captain means that, first of all, you are handling the casting for Sesame Street. So it's a little easy because, we know who plays Elmo, and we know who plays Abby, and we know who plays, all these characters, Mr. Snuffleupagus. We know that. So there are other characters that come along, however, that we don't know who plays them. The letter G or AM Dog number 2. So it's my job to cast those roles out of our stable of Sesame Street Muppet performers, and we have 14 Sesame Street Muppet performers. And that's the first layer of it. The next layer of it is that I am to be at all of the production meetings so that I can help troubleshoot with directors and with producers and with all the different departments, the set department, props department, costume department, whomever, any puppet-related issues that have to do with a particular script, whether it's balancing, 100 hats on somebody's head, or, can Telly twirl a lasso, any number of things we try to troubleshoot in these production meetings. So that's another layer of it. A third layer of it is that after we have shot the shows and the shows are being edited, I look at those shows and make sure that everything looks good, that all the puppetry looks good, that there hasn't been an ISO shot, an isolated shot that's been inserted in there inadvertently. So an ISO shot is a shot that the puppeteer doesn't see. And when we're working on Sesame Street, we have a live 3-camera line cut. So we have 3 cameras that we are constantly making adjustments to, and we have a wide shot and generally two close-ups. And sometimes, depends on the reason, whether it's a mistake or whether it's a timing thing where they have to cut the show down, they might cut in one of those ISO shots, but the puppet doesn't look great. And so it's my job to kind of flag those moments and say, is there another solution for this? Is there something else we can do other than using that shot? Because that's the puppetry looks bad there, and the puppeteer that's performing that puppet will not appreciate seeing their work look like that when that was not the shot they were seeing. So that's one of the jobs. Then another layer of the puppet captaincy, Grant, you're regretting asking this now, aren't you? So another layer of that is to help Sesame Workshop build their bench of Muppet performers. So on Sesame Street, we have a mentorship program, and we have 8 mentees that come from all different backgrounds, and they are and all different ages, and they live in different parts of the country. A lot of them live here on the East Coast, but some of them live elsewhere. And they are people that I have designated and producers have designated, and also assistant puppet captain Marty Robinson has designated to be these people that we're really kind of keeping an eye on, and we want to bring them along, and we want to see them grow. We want to grow these performers and help deepen our bench at Sesame Street. I mean, 14 performers is a lot of performers, but we do need to kind of look to the future. We need to be able to look to see what's ahead of us and always be ready, and growing these performers. And that's the other another layer of it. I could probably think of a couple of other layers, but that's the main layers right there.
That's a lot of layers.
It is.
Well, and also on the show, on top of all those layers, you also moved to directing. You've directed some episodes of the show as well. Did you learn anything new about puppetry when you started directing puppets? Or was it all pretty much like, I know what I'm doing?
I think it was the opposite. I think that because I had puppeteered for so long, and in doing so, you're really just watching the show. You're watching the show constantly for years and years and years, watching the show. When does the director cut to a close-up? Why did they cut to a close-up? Why didn't they play it on a 2-shot? Why? A lot of questions came into my head. And in observing directing by way of, through puppetry, through being a puppeteer and an actor, I think I was able to catch on a little quicker than had I just come from the outside. And I think it's helpful a lot of times to have a puppeteer as your director. I mean, I'm saying this being one of them, but there aren't a ton of them that are puppeteer directors. But I do feel like I know the issues that we're going to have. I can try to troubleshoot those things ahead of time in ways that maybe people that aren't puppeteers it might be a little bit more difficult. Now, that being said, we'll get to the set, and I could have planned out all day what's going to happen, and it completely goes down the tubes. That sometimes happens, and it just, you have to try to figure out how to work around it.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a little break from Sesame Street and ask you about Ooby, because you were on Ooby and
Yes.
You played Angus.
Uh-huh.
And that show is so unique
Yeah.
from a puppetry standpoint because you're just stripping it down to its basics.
Yes, that's true. I did only a few episodes on there, and I played a very weird character. I have very little recollection of it, but I do know that the eyes were underneath my fingers. That was just what they said, put the eyes underneath. It wasn't my idea. And I do remember, I think I had to, I'm not particularly hairy, but we had to, our arms had to be shaved. That's all I remember about it, really.
Behind the scenes of Ooby.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I can really, truly remember. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, you can, even if they're just little eyes, you can get a lot of emotion and a lot of character out of just your hand, provided you have a fun character that you're playing.
Right. Well, in 2014, Muppets Most Wanted came out, and you played Constantine. Was there an audition process for that, or were you just kind of cast? There was.
There was an audition process with James Bobin, the director. I cannot recall who all was auditioning. I know that myself and Bill Beretta auditioned for that role, and it was a blast. I mean, it was one of the most fun jobs I have ever had.
Where did his voice come from? Just playing around, or?
Yeah. I mean, it was just playing around. It was talking with James, the director. I mean, there was this fine line that I wanted to play, which is that he is maybe legitimately dangerous in that he is very stupid, which could be very dangerous. And I didn't want him to feel like a caricature, but I wanted him to feel like a character. I wanted him to feel real. And I had a dialect coach that helped me with the accent. And I had written a whole story for him in my head of what, not in my head, I wrote it down on paper. I didn't even write it on paper. I put it on a computer. That's what you do now. You don't write it on paper anymore. I put it on a computer. I had his whole story, and I kept that in my head, so I was able to kind of keep in mind what I saw his journey to be. And it was fun. Creating this character with James was a blast.
You also took over the role of Uncle Deadly, and he really came into his own on the Muppets TV series.
Yeah.
Was it sort of freeing developing this character who, kind of up to that point, he'd only been seen occasionally in background parts and minor parts?
Yes. I mean, on the first Muppets film, or the 2011 Muppets film, there's so much cutting room material of Uncle Deadly and Bobo just messing around. It was ridiculous. And that's where I think I kind of latched on to who I saw him to be. And I knew that one of Jerry's favorite actors was John Carradine, and he had this big, rich voice that I can't do, but I can do my approximation of it. And that's who Jerry saw Uncle Deadly as, this kind of John Carradine actor type. And I just kind of ran with it there. There isn't a ton of stuff with Uncle Deadly before that movie. And, it was a blast, too, to just kind of sit and play with Bill and just mess around and make things up. And on the series, I got to do that a lot more. And they wrote a lot more for him. And then they started to write things for him that I was like, guys, the thing about Uncle Deadly to me is I don't want to know too much about him. I want to know about him, sure, and I want to see. They had written something where, like, we're in Uncle Deadly's house. It was like, I don't want to go to Uncle Deadly's house. Don't give up too much about him, because that takes away some of his mystery, some of his magic, some of his spice that I love. And they respectfully didn't put us in his house, but he is a fun character. I can just put him on and just talk as him. Things just come out of me, and I not really think of what they are. They just kind of come out.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a fantastic character, and you're amazing in that role. That's it.
Very kind of you.
He's I know he's a huge fan favorite as well.
Yeah.
Having stepped into some big roles like the Count and Big Bird, was it nerve-wracking to take on the role of Kermit, or was it like a little bit easier because you had done this before? You had stepped into roles like that before.
I think anytime that you are charged with taking on a legacy character, whether it's the Count or Big Bird or Kermit, there is an element of nervousness. It's a big responsibility, and it's very humbling. And he's so much Jim Henson to me. And my goal, whether it's Jim or whether it's Carol Spinney or whether it's Jerry Nelson or Richard Hunt, performers who originated characters that I play now, it's my goal to honor that Muppet performer's original performance and intent the best way that I can, and still allowing the character to evolve. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So for me, it's nerve-wracking, yes. But it's not an imitation. It's aiming to be the heart of that character, and the heart of who that character is, and that's what I see my job is, to honor that original performer and that original role and keep it growing so it can live on. If I thought about it, though, and if I just let my brain spin around how big the responsibility was, I'd never be able to do it. I have to think about the objective of the character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having played Constantine and now Kermit, do they share any characteristics? Is there anything similar about those two characters?
No, there's really not. No, I don't think so. I mean, I picture in my head, Constantine is just the biggest idiot. He's just dumb. He doesn't know how dumb he is. And that's what I love about him, by the way. I love that he is just so dumb. And Kermit is sharp. He's smart. He can be snarky. He's got a huge heart. He loves his friends more than anything. I don't even know if Constantine has any friends. So they're very different. They're very different characters, which is that's one of the great things about being a Muppet performer is, again, playing these different characters that have different parts of myself, I guess, that we kind of blow up into these larger-than-life characters.
With the Muppets, you've also done a lot of great live appearances, like the Hollywood Bowl and the O2 and the Outland Lands Festival in San Francisco. Do you have a favorite of these live performances that you got to do?
They are all fun. We did Outside Lands first, and that was really an experiment just to see what would happen if we brought this fake band, to this real music festival.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun. The energy from the crowd was so intense because, again, none of us knew what was going to happen. We were all maybe a little nervous about it, not knowing if it was going to hit or not. And with that first song, which was Can You Picture That? It was amazing. It was just so much fun. And then with the Muppets Take the Bowl and the O2 show, so the Muppets Take the Bowl, that was my first live appearance as Kermit. So that has a little bit of a special place in my heart because, I mean, that's putting it all out there on the line for 18,000 people that night, all at one time. And plus, who doesn't love seeing a Muppet Show, and then a Muppet Show live where I can choose to look either at the big screens and see the show, or I can look at the stage and see how the puppeteers are doing this? That's pretty cool. So I liked those shows for doing that, for that purpose. I also have this other really favorite job that I did, a live show that was just last year at the Newport Folk Festival. And it was just Kermit singing Rainbow Connection with Jim James. And I was completely seen by everybody. And I had Peter Linz there helping me playing the banjo. But to be there and in looking out at the sea of people was just remarkable. And the love that I was feeling for this little frog was amazing.
How do you adjust the performance of a character when you go from doing TV and film to something big like that, like one of those festivals?
Well, I'd like to say that there's a big adjustment, but because we are always being seen on camera, you kind of have to play. There's it's like a little half and half, because you do have to kind of feel like you're playing a big room like the Hollywood Bowl. You have to kind of project. But the puppetry really still needs to feel like it fits the screen, the frame that you're seeing. You don't want to just blow everything out and be screaming. It would just feel weird to do that, and it would look weird on these big giant screens. So there's probably a little bit of a change, but playing a live house as opposed to playing something on TV or in a film. I can tell you that on a film, a lot of times we will even play things even smaller, especially in close-up. We'll make it smaller. We'll make it more subtle. We'll bring the lip sync down a little bit just to, make it feel smaller. And so that big face of that character fills that screen, but it's not, flapping and moving around so you can't see it.
Excellent. Well, recently the Muppets and Sesame Street, because of the current goings-on in the world, have been filming at home. Can you talk maybe from a geek-out technical standpoint what you're using to film at home?
Yeah, so we actually just did this last week, is that, and we've now done this twice for Sesame Street. So we filmed 2 Sesame Street specials at home. Everybody's at home. And we did it over Zoom. And, everybody's got their Zoom open so that I got to direct this so that I could see what was going on in their room, and then they shot everything on iPhones. That's what it was all shot on, iPhones or iPads or whatever they had. And then we have some people have like separate audio. Some people is just going right into their phone. It's a little ragtag, but I think the result, especially in that first special, was it really achieved what it was setting out to do, which was being a little virtual play date and kind of show kids that they could have play dates via video chat like we did. And but there's no huge secrets except for I was sent Big Bird during this time. And I had to put them together, which I'd never done before. I didn't put the whole bird together. I only had the head and the neck. Big Bird comes in 3 pieces, so I had 2 pieces. And so I had to figure out how to put him together. I had somebody talk me through it.
It's like that's the greatest tech support call in the
Yeah.
entire world.
How do I put the head on?
There's no instructions, like IKEA. Yeah. What's happening?
I know.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to talk about your own puppetry podcast, Below the Frame, and this started as a Facebook Live show, right?
It did, yeah. For some reason, Facebook Live there were a lot of people doing things live on Facebook, and so I decided I was gonna do something, and I just started recording something, and then I roped like Stephanie DeBruzzo into it, and then I roped Peter Linz and Tyler Bunch and Carmen Osbar. I just kind of roped them all into helping me out. And Leslie Carrara, she helped me, and then we kind of did it during every week. We tried to do it every week that we were shooting, and we did it live, and we did it during our lunch hour, and like I would try to answer questions, and I would try to have some sort of content, puppetry related or behind the scenes related, or asking a puppeteer about something that isn't puppets, and like what's your favorite breakfast, and just ridiculous things like that. And then we would have like a music element in it, and it was so much fun to do, but so tiring to do every week in the middle of a lunch break. And not to mention, then we would have to do other lunch breaks where we'd have PR interviews or other shoots that we would have to be doing. So it became unmanageable and couldn't really do it. So I decided, maybe I should try it as a podcast, and I can take my time. There's no live element to it. Maybe it'll reach more people, in fact, because, I don't know how many people. We reached a lot of people on Facebook Live, but I feel like just having it as a podcast might make it a little bit more attainable for people to listen to wherever they're going. And so we're doing, I've done interviews with people, and they're very in-depth, much like this format here. They're in-depth interviews. We have fake ads for things like arm rods and live hands and things like that. And then I'm really excited that we're going to be talking a lot about Jerry Nelson throughout the podcast. Certain episodes will deal with a little moment about Jerry. And so I'm very excited about it. It's kind of just me throwing this thing together by myself. So that's one thing. I do have some help, some support. And the Muppet performers have all come to my aid from, can you just talk about lip sync for like a minute and a half? And, great. Yeah, I'll talk about that. To, doing other things for me. And it's been really fun. And I can't wait for it to be out there. I think we're going to launch it in August, like August 12th. I'm going to say it right here, August 12th.
There you go.
Maybe it's already out by now.
No, this is coming out the beginning of August. So
great. Well, August 12th.
August 12th. Where can people go if they want to listen to it?
Well, you'll have to go to either my Twitter or Instagram, which is at WelcomeMattV, or for Below the Frame, there's also an Instagram, which is at Below the Frame, or on Twitter, it's just at Below Frame for some reason. That's what it gave me when I tried to put in Below the Frame. But that's, following me on social media, there'll be announcements coming up soon about that.
Excellent. Well, I'll have links to those in the show notes for this as well, so people can get it. But we're going to wrap up here by talking about the new Muppet show, Muppets Now.
Yeah.
Available on Disney Plus. How is this show different from what we've seen the Muppets do before?
Well, I would say that this is different in a big way, is that Muppets Now, as opposed to like the 2015 series, Muppets Now isn't a narrative. It's not a workplace comedy like the ABC series was. It has this unscripted feel to it that has segments that are hosted by different Muppets. And we have guest stars. We have a lot of great guest stars, Taye Diggs and Linda Cardellini and RuPaul and Danny Trejo and Aubrey Plaza and Seth Rogen, and they all are part of these segments that we have produced. And there are like 4 segments in each episode. And they are segments such as there's like a game show with Pepe called Pepe's Unbelievable Game Show. There is a cooking segment with a Swedish chef, of course, called Okie Dokie Cookin'. There is an interview segment called Mupp Close and Personal. One example is that Kermit interviews RuPaul, and it does not go as he, in typical Muppet fashion, does not go as he had planned. There is a Muppet Labs field test with Bunsen and Beaker where they kind of do science experiments, which is kind of fun. And there's another one called Lifestyle with Miss Piggy, or maybe it's Lifestyle. She'll say it's Lifestyle, but it's kind of it's like a tips show. It's discussing lifestyle tips, and that's really fun as well. And there's another one called Muppet Masters where you like, what do the Muppets do when you're not watching? That's kind of what they do. So those are the different segments that you'll see. We did 6 episodes, and it kind of addresses the question of what would the Muppets look at, and what would they comment on in the age of streaming and reality TV or unscripted television.
Well, it reminded me, because I got to see a sneak preview a little bit before this interview, and Uncle Deadly, hilarious in the first segment with Miss Piggy. So funny. It reminded me a lot of, in the recent years, the Muppets have had a lot of success with the YouTube videos. And so it reminded me a lot of that, So I think if people enjoyed those, they're really going to enjoy that. I think everyone's going to enjoy it because it's fun. But
I think it's a lot of fun. It's got this craziness to it, this zaniness that the Muppets, when we're doing it right, that's what the Muppets are really known for, this zaniness. And it has a real sense of that all throughout every episode.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to see the rest of them, and I'm excited for everyone to get to watch it. I always like to wrap up here with a final question. What has been the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
The highlight of my career so far. I mean, I have experienced a lot of amazing things through my career. I'm really, really grateful for all of them. If I looked at Sesame Street, I would say it's the honor of carrying on the legacy characters of Big Bird and the Count. And if I was looking at the Muppets, I would say it's, getting to do a movie as the villain in the movie. But I think the highlight is getting to know these people that I get to work with. I have been so lucky to get to work with people that were heroes of mine when I was a kid. And then I got to work alongside them, and I'm still working alongside many of them. And that is a highlight, to see that they are these people that I looked up to when I was a kid, and I still look up to them now because they're pretty amazing people. And they are friends of mine. So I think that's the highlight, Grant. Does that count?
That does count. I will accept that.
Good.
That's a fantastic answer. Well, Matt, I can't thank you enough for being here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
It was my pleasure, Grant. Thanks for having me.
Big thanks to Matt Vogel for being on this episode of the show. For links to Matt's social media, as well as to some of the other things we discussed, check out the show notes for this episode number 50, over at underthepuppet.com. Special thanks as well to Leslie Carrara-Rudolph and Ashley Knox for helping make this interview possible. Well, now it's time to announce the winner of episode 48's giveaway for a brand new set of DVDs featuring our guest for that episode, ventriloquist Jay Johnson. The question was, what was the subject of the miniature installation that Jay Johnson's mentor, Art Sieving, was setting up on the day that Jay Johnson met him? The answer was The Life of Abraham Lincoln. And the winner for this giveaway is past guest Randall Metz of Children's Fairyland. Congratulations, Randall. Your DVDs are on the way. Thank you so much to everyone who entered. This episode, we have a giveaway of a book that should be on every puppeteer's shelf. Definitely every builder's shelf. It's called Figures in the Fourth Dimension by Ellen S. Rixford. If you want to build a puppet with a mechanical mouth or blinking eyes, this is a must-read. It's got photographs and technical drawings. This book is going to teach you everything you need to know. You can enter to win this $80 beautiful hardcover book if you can answer the following question about the interview you just heard. When Matt Vogel was performing his own puppet shows after college, what did he use to build his puppet stage? When you find the answer, send it in an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com with the subject line giveaway, and you'll be entered to win. All entries for this giveaway must be received by August 15th, 2020. The winner will be chosen at random from all correct entries and be announced on the September 1st, 2020 episode of the show. Only one entry per household. Good luck! Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, you can call our voicemail line at 818-806-9604, or you can click the Call the Show button in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. You can also send them via email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching for Under the Puppet. Thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you next time right here on Under the Puppet. This episode of Under the Puppet featured music by Dan Ring and was edited by Steven Staver. Under the Puppet is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly pledge for as little as $1 a month. Patrons get new episodes before they are released, behind-the-scenes information, and exclusive bonus episodes. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly pledge today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2020 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Bachogo executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.